Hi, everyone. You don't want to miss this episode. We're going to talk about the debt dilemma facing Canadian households. We're going to dig into the stats. How much are Canadians in debt? Are you better than average? Are you worse than average? Let's see where the trends are going, and then we're going to offer solutions on what you can do. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Control and Compound. I'm Darren Mitchell. Joining me as always, Christina Wyatt. Christina, how you doing today?
Hey, Darren, I am doing awesome. Excited for this podcast today. I think it's a really relevant topic. It's impacting many Canadians out there. I'm ready to dig into the debt dilemma and how maybe we might be able to help some of those out there in it.
Yeah, I love it. Today we're gonna dive into the whole something that affects really almost all Canadians, at least at some point of their life, every Canadian household, and that's rising debt and financial vulnerabilities. And the financial vulnerabilities it creates can be devastating to a family, not just financially, and we'll talk more about that later. But the headlines are soaring about household debt in Canada, so we thought we'd do a podcast on it and say, okay, what are the headlines just fear mongering or what's really going on? So we're going to find out what it means for Canadians, and then more importantly, what you can do with it. So we got a lot to unpack today.
Yeah, it's a topic that hits home for many Canadians. So whether it's the mortgage renewals that are coming up, we've got credit card debts that are soaring and just getting higher. We've got the rising cost of living that we talk about a lot, inflation. So people are really starting to feel the pressure. So we want to break that all down today, and then we want to share some strategies on how people can climb out of it.
Perfect. Before we get started, though, if it's your first time watching or listening, thank you. And if you're have followed us before, please actually follow us. Hit that follow button, hit the like button, leave a 5-star review. It really helps our algorithms, and we can offer you more stuff and reach more people. So let's talk with the big picture, Christina. Household debt to income ratio. Okay, so we're going to talk about household debt to income ratio. And we're going to break that down exactly what it is and what ratios the average Canadian has. So if you think of debt, household debt to income, take all your debt at the top on the top. So that would be your mortgage, your car loans, your credit card payments, any loans you have, and then divide it by your after-tax income. So not your gross income, your after-tax income. So I'll walk you through an example. So let's say someone had a $400,000 mortgage. Okay, so that would be a secured mortgage. And then they had about $50,000 in car loans, credit cards, lines of credit, whatever. So total debt of 450, and the household, the couple, was making 100,000 after taxes. So 450 divided by 100,000, they would have a 450% household debt to income ratio. Okay, so typically people in the younger age brackets are going to have higher ratios. People in the older age brackets may have a zero or small income or debt household debt to income ratio. So let's say you only owe $10,000 total debt on a car loan or something, and your income in the household's 100 grand. Well, then you'd have a 10% debt to income ratio. So obviously, you want the lower ratio, the better. And what like don't get hung up on where your ratio is. I mean, yes, it's important, and yes, you want to lower it, but we're going to give you the averages, and the averages across the Canada really tell us how the country's doing as a whole, how Canadian households are doing. Typically, you're in your 60s and 70s, you're going to have a much lower ratio than if you're in your 20s and 30s, but it's really indicative of the country as a whole and how we're doing. We talk a lot about the federal government and their debt and their deficits. And if you haven't watched the Jake Fuss episode, that was fantastic, where we break down Canadian government debt. But for household debt, let's compare us to other G7 countries. So if we look at our peers in other countries, how are we doing? So in Italy, the number is 90%. So their debt to income is 90%. That's a really good number. The Italians are doing really well on that. If we look at some other companies, Germany's 100%. France is 127. The French are spending a little bit of money. The UK is 150%. That's getting up there. So their debt to income, they have more debt than they have income, annual after-tax income. And UK, the housing prices and rent is pretty expensive in a lot of parts of that. Japan is 122. And our good friends in the South, the United States of America, they are at 100%. So Americans are even Steven. Debt to income, 100%, same debt as income on average. Now we come to Canada. Canada's household debt to income is about 180%. That is one of the highest debt to income ratios in the world. Now, it's come down slightly the last couple of quarters, but it's still right around pushing that 180%. So, highest in the G7 and one of the highest in the world. It's not great.
That's crazy. Like it's when you put numbers to it, it makes it very real. And when I was looking through numbers as well, as of September 2024, the total credit liabilities of Canadians were approximately 2.9 trillion. So just shy of $3 trillion in debt. Canadians holding debt of $3 trillion, which is it's crazy to even think about. And we think of it as mortgages, like you got that secure debt with your mortgages, but really a lot of it has to do with credit cards, loans, lines of credit, other car loans, things like that. So it's not just the mortgages that we're encompassing here. It's also those other types of loans. So I had found a stat from Equifax where the average Canadian household, and again, averages right across the country, but the average Canadian household has about a little over 21,000 in just consumer debt, right? So nothing to do with the mortgage whatsoever, just that additional debt that they're carrying. So with interest rates rising, the cost of servicing this debt, or we are seeing interest rates coming back down, but as they rose over the last couple of years and where we're at, it's extremely hard for extremely hard for Canadians to service that debt.
Yeah, you make a good point on the mortgages. Like, obviously, we got a lot of real estate investors that listen to this podcast, and real estate investors, if you have multiple properties, you're gonna have more debt, and we can talk about good debt and bad debt and stuff. But again, we're talking averages, and the mortgage is a real kicker because we've had slightly lower interest rates than we have in the last couple of years, but we still have a lot of people where their mortgages are going to come due in the next year, and it's going to be much, much higher renewal rates than what they were paying 4 and 5 years ago when they locked in. And that's going to be significant on people's finances.
Yeah, and it's not just about the numbers. We've been talking a lot about the numbers, but consider the financial strain and the impacts this has on people's mental health, on relationships. A leading cause of divorce is financial problems. Like things like this, it impacts more than just the numbers. It impacts the individuals. It impacts the families. So when we're looking at it, it's the stress disorders, substance abuse, like all of these things come from the stress that comes from trying to keep up with these debt loads.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention like poor nutrition. You can't afford to buy the food you want to buy. Poor sleep because you're stressed, and then parental problems. Right? If you can't provide for your kids in the way you'd like, that is a stressful situation within the family. So there's all kinds of non-financial consequences of having too much debt. So let's talk about the broader risk here. So let's talk about the risks and the consequences. So when households are spending so much money on debt compared to their income, they have less money to spend on other things. And that really slows the economy down. So it can create a domino effect. If too many people are in debt and all their money is going towards paying their debts, it could even destabilize the financial system. So when you're spending all this money on debt, you don't have that discretionary spending. And this really hurts a lot of industries, but especially certain industries. Hospitality, bar, restaurant business is not doing well in Canada right now. They're going through some challenges because if all your money is to pay all these higher interest rates on your mortgage, your car loans, your line of credit, your credit cards, you don't have the money to go out to a nice restaurant or out to a restaurant or down to the bar, have a few drinks. So it's really hurting hospitality, travel, tourism, automobile sales. And all these things we mentioned, what happens is it lowers GDP, gross domestic product of the country. It also lowers corporate tax. Companies make less money because they're not doing as well. They pay less tax. The government has less revenue. And what does the government do when it has less revenue? They increase taxes. And now our after-tax income is going to go down. And it's just a bad spiral to be in as a country.
Yeah, we didn't even hit on inflation, right? Like over the last couple of years, we've seen the cost of groceries, gas, and just about everything else you can think of go up. So even people who don't have a lot of debt are also feeling the squeeze right now. It's a perfect storm for financial challenges for Canadians.
Yeah, and again, I don't believe the government inflation numbers at all, their basket of goods and how they calculate it. But I came across a good stat the other day. It was cumulative inflation. So if we go from January 1st, 2021 to September 2024, so about 3.5 years, the cumulative food inflation was 17.5%. So in 3.5 years, food costs went up just about 20%. Just food up 20%. And again, I would argue it's even more because the way the government calculates it, I think under represents what the true inflation is. Now, it's not just doom and gloom. We're going to offer some solutions here. But first, Christina, let's talk about what people can do to protect themselves from these spiraling debts.
Yeah, protect and try to get out. Try to get out from under it, right? So the first thing that I want to talk about is people call it budgeting. I like to call it a cash flow plan, but it's really creating a big picture of your spending. So tracking your spending and what's coming in and what's coming out of the bank account. So I highly recommend taking a inventory of all of your fixed expenses, all of your variable expenses, your income that's coming in and what's going back out. So one, you can see where you might be able to cut down. There might be things that you're spending on that you don't need to be spending on. And two, you can really figure out how much you can allocate towards debt repayment, because it's all great for me to tell you, take $2,000 a month and put it on your debt to kind of get rid of it. But if that $2,000 is not there, it's just going to put you in more debt later on. So you need to figure out how much you can allocate. And then the second piece of that when it comes to debt repayment is making a debt repayment strategy. So you actually need a plan. You can't just be throwing money at these different at the different debts and hope that it eventually goes away. There's different methods that people use. One's called an avalanche method. That's where you take the debt with the highest interest rate and you pay the minimum on the others and you throw all the extra that you can allocate towards that one higher interest debt. Another one is the snowball method that you can use, and that's where you take an inventory of the debts and you actually pick the smallest amount owing and you throw everything at this, whether the interest rate is higher or lower, you throw everything at that small one. That can really feel good from a human nature. It's like you've knocked a couple off, you can get some momentum going. So there's different strategies that you can use, debt consolidation, all of those things. You need to pick the game plan that's right for you. And then you need to make a target date for when you want it paid off, because if there's no target date, you're not going to pick that goal. So I highly recommend doing the cash flow plan so you can figure out how much you can allocate to those debt repayment strategies, picking a strategy, and then sticking to it. So that's kind of my take on where to start.
Great advice, Christina, because even there's probably a lot of people listening that are higher income earners, that are business owners, that are real estate investors, that they're making all kinds of money or making big money. But it's amazing when we meet with those people how they have no idea how much they're spending a month. You can be making a couple $100,000 going, oh, my life's good. But then what happens when something happens? What happens when there is an emergency? What happens when an opportunity comes along and you can't take advantage of it? Because there's all kinds of stories out there where people made big money their whole careers, and all of a sudden 65 and 70, they're running out of money because they never really looked at what they were spending a month. They never really did that cash flow planning. They never really looked at paying down debts the proper way. They never looked at building opportunity funds that we're going to talk about. So great advice, Christina. And on mortgage renewals, I just, don't just take what your bank offers. Like, we all get a mortgage renewal. Oh, my rate's going from this up to this or whatever. Shop around, talk to a mortgage broker, see what you can find out, and do it well in advance. So don't wait till the last minute. And maybe, if things are tight, maybe you need to extend the amortization period. Okay. It's not always ideal for a lot of people, but interest rates are really affecting people. The inflation's really affecting people. It's all about finding what works for you and don't wait till the last minute. So shopping around, I also recommend looking at your other debts. It's amazing how many people have lines of credit and credit cards. They have no idea what rate they're paying on that. It's like, oh, I've got a line of credit. What's your rate? I don't know. Those can really vary from person to person. And if you have one of those rewards travel cards, I have them. I love them. It's great. You collect points. Well, they're great if you're paying off your bill every month, but those tend to have much higher interest rates than maybe a basic card. So maybe you can switch to a line of credit or a basic credit card where you have lower rates if you're not paying it off each month. So there's all kinds of things you can do preemptively to not get in this situation. And if you're in a problem situation, things you can address.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to shop around and do your due diligence. Don't just assume what you have is the best, right? We want to make sure that we stay on top of these things. And sometimes instead of dealing with the problem, you push it under the rug, but take it on, call those companies, get on the phone, negotiate those rates. I've seen it done and it works. Another big one that we started talking about, Darren, that I think we should have a bit of a focus on is building that emergency fund, or as we like to call it around here, an opportunity and emergency fund. So you should shoot for about a year's income, but even if it's just a few months worth of expenses, having that cushion can make a huge difference if things change, tough times, things happen, emergencies. We all know that they are going to happen throughout your life. So having that cushion can be very helpful. I recommend adding it. We talked about cash flow plans and kind of breaking down your fixed expenses. I recommend adding this as a fixed expense to your cash flow plan. You have to put away each month. Consider it just like a bill. The reason you do that is because we always tell people pay yourself first. And this emergency fund we use as an opportunity too. So it's paying yourself first. And if you don't pay yourself first, you just wait till the end of the month and say, hey, yeah, I'm going to take whatever I have left over and I'm going to throw it into the emergency fund. I can guarantee you there's going to be nothing left over to put into that emergency fund. So consider it just like a bill that you have to pay every month that you swipe into that emergency opportunity fund, so that when these things hit, good and bad, we have the cash sitting there to be able to do it.
Yeah, and if you've been following us, you know anything about control on compound, this is where we come in. We're big advocates of the infinite banking concept or cash value life insurance, and really we think it is the ultimate place to save and store your wealth. So when you're building that opportunity slash emergency fund, we don't think there's any other place that is superior to what we can do with the specially designed high cash value life insurance. It's a powerful tool that allows you to stay in control of your money. And when you're in control of your money, you can deal with those opportunities. You can take advantage of those opportunities, deal with those emergencies. And it's one of the time tested, proven ways to build wealth. It's what a lot of Canadians are doing. So build that opportunity emergency fund. Listen to Christina and say, make it a fixed expense that you pay yourself first. Talk to us maybe about an opportunity slash emergency fund, how you build it. But that's really one of the key elements of your financial plan. If you want to get out from where you are, or you want to get to places you dream of, they all start with an opportunity slash emergency fund.
Yeah, we call it the foundation, right? The foundation of your financial plan. You want to make sure you have a very solid base, and that emergency opportunity fund. We like to have it as our high cash value policies. That's going to be allow you to build out the rest of your plan. So that was, yeah, I think we've got a lot of really good information that we shared here and some tips. Darren, if you could give our listeners one piece of advice or one big takeaway from what we chatted about today, what would it be for you?
I would say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So don't wait. Take action. You need to take action on this stuff. You don't, yeah, well, let me do this and then I'll do that. No, take action now, whether it's budgeting your cash flow plan, starting a cash value life insurance policy, tracking your expenses, managing your debts, finding out what the interest rates are, whatever it is, like take action now. There's never been a better time than today to get on top of this. If you want to have great financial success for your family in the future, or you want to get out from the financial stress that you're under today, the time is now. So check those loans, talk well in advance of those mortgages renewing, what your options are. And of course, you want to build that opportunity emergency fund, reach out to one of our team members, and we'd be happy to help you with that.
Exactly. We shared a lot of good actionable tips in this podcast that I think Canadians can take and use and go forward. So, like you said, if you want to learn more about that emergency operating or opportunity fund that we specialize in, that high cash value life insurance policy, reach out to us. But today's the day. If you're listening to this podcast and you haven't implemented any of these things towards reducing or eliminating your debt and getting rid of that debt dilemma, today's the day to take action and start moving forward.
All right. Well, that's about it for today's episode. We hope you thought this was valuable. We appreciate you listening, appreciate you watching. And if you are listening and watching, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this episode with someone who you think might need it. And if there's a future episode you'd like us to cover, please reach out, and we're We're happy to do anything that our listeners request within reason. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for watching this episode of Control and Compound. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you never miss a new episode. And if you're ready to learn more, head to our website, controlandcompound.com. The link's below.